All right, these are your notes for sections 8.4 and 8.5, and we're going to talk about a rhombus in this video. Now, a rhombus is a parallelogram with four congruent sides. Okay? So that's what a rhombus is. It's a parallelogram with four congruent sides. So if we look at our picture here, what we would mark is that all the sides are congruent. That's all we can mark. That's all we know in the definition. Since it's also a parallelogram, we can have our sides marked parallel. But that's about it. Okay? That's all we can see from the definition. Now, like we did when we talked about a rectangle, a rhombus is a specific type of rectangle. So I'm going to draw you that Venn diagram again. Remember, we started out with the big circle, which was our quadrilaterals. Then we had our parallelograms. And then we had rectangles here. I'm going to use RE for rectangles. Rhombus is a different type. Okay? It's not a rectangle. They aren't in the same circle. We don't draw them in the circle like we did the rest of these, okay? It's a separate circle, but it goes inside that big parallelogram circle, okay? It's a specific type of parallelogram. Now, since it's a specific type of parallelogram, the same thing happens that happened with a rectangle. These first four are all going to be the ideas we talked about from parallelograms, okay? First one, opposite sides congruent, which makes sense because all the sides are the same length. So yes, the top and bottom are going to be the same. So are the left and right. They're actually all going to be the same number. But we can make that more general and just say opposite sides are congruent. Second one, opposite angles are congruent. Okay, so the angles across from each other are going to be the same measures. And you can kind of see that from a picture. If I drew you a rhombus here, these two angles, they look like they're the same measure, and they are. They're going to be congruent. So are these angles here, okay? Just like a parallelogram. The third bullet point, consecutive angles are supplementary, which again means they add to 180, okay? And consecutive again means that they're next to each other, so they'll be on the same side of the rhombus, okay? Either both angles will be on the bottom or both angles will be on the left. Those two angles will add to 180. And the last one is that diagonals bisect each other. Okay, now they're not congruent. They're not congruent like they are for a rectangle because a rhombus is not a rectangle. They just bisect each other. They cut each other in half. Now the next bullet point comes from the definition. It has four congruent sides. Okay, new idea here. Again, those first four are the same basic ideas from a parallelogram. Now we're getting into some new ideas. Rhombus has four congruent sides. Next idea deals with the diagonals. The diagonals are perpendicular. And remember our symbol for perpendicular is that upside down T. Remember, perpendicular means makes a right angle or 90 degrees. Okay? So if we have our figure here, this is a rhombus. We'll draw on our diagonals. We need both of them. And they're perpendicular, so they make a right angle. And that's what this big idea is that they intersect and they form 90-degree angles. Okay? The next one is that the diagonals bisect the angles. Okay, and remember bisect means cut in half. So if we draw our diagonals in, what happens is that these four angles are all going to be the same. Now that's only one of the diagonals. These angles are going to be the same. And the reason we know that they bisect is because those opposite angles are congruent. Okay? This angle, this big angle here, and this big angle here are the same measure. If one of them was 50, the other one would be 50. And what the diagonal does is it cuts those two in half. And since they're congruent, all four of the smaller angles would be 25. It'd be half of that. The same thing happens with the bigger angles. They get cut in half also, and since they're congruent, they get cut to be, all four of them are the same measure. Okay, so those are your new characteristics. Again, a rhombus has the same basic ideas as a parallelogram because it's a specific type of parallelogram. And then the new ideas are that a rhombus has four congruent sides, the diagonals make a right angle, they're perpendicular, and the diagonals bisect those angles. So we're going to use those ideas and we're going to do one example here. Okay, our example says quadrilateral WXYZ is a rhombus. So it tells us that it's that specific type of parallelogram. If XY is 5, OXO is 3X, OZ is 2 plus X, WO is 4, and OY is 2Y, we need to find these 5 things here. XY, WZ, WY, and angle XOW. They gave us the picture, but the picture's not marked. So we need to go through and mark it first of all. Okay? It says XY is 5, XO is 3X, OZ is 2 plus X, WO is 4, and OY is 2Y. Okay, we need to find all of these things. Let's start with X. Remember that a rhombus is a parallelogram, so the diagonals bisect each other. That means that these two parts of a diagonal are going to be congruent. Same thing happens with these two. They're congruent also. Okay? And remember, congruent things can be set equal to each other. So we say 3x equals 2 plus x. Pretty simple. Since they're congruent, the diagonals cut each other into congruent pieces. We set those two things equal to each other. Now we subtract x from both sides. 3x minus x is 2x equals 2. Divide by 2. X is 1. So there's our first one. X is 1. We can do the same thing for y. 4 equals 2y. Divide by 2. Y is 2. And it's the same reason, because the diagonals, since it's a parallelogram, a specific type of parallelogram, cut each other in half. They bisect each other. Next one is WZ. Well, WZ is one of the sides. Remember, all the sides are congruent in a rhombus. So if I know that one side is 5, means all sides are 5. So WZ is 5. WY, that's this whole diagonal here. Okay? Well, if we know that part of it's 4, the other part has to be 4, so we just add them together. 4 plus 4 is 8. So the whole diagonal would be 8. And the last one is angle XOW, which is right here. Remember, we said the diagonals, this was one of our new ideas, the diagonals are perpendicular. Well, that's where the two diagonals meet. So that means it's 90 degrees, because they make a right angle. Okay? So that wasn't too difficult. We really only needed to use math to find x and y. And all it was setting things equal to each other. Okay? So, what you need to get from this video are the new ideas about a rhombus. A rhombus is a specific type of parallelogram. It has 4 congruent sides. The new ideas, diagonal bisect each other. The diagonals bisect the angles, and the diagonals are perpendicular to each other. Okay? So those are your new ideas, your 3 new ideas, in addition to the fact that it's already a parallelogram. Okay? If you have any questions, go back and rewatch the video. If you still have questions, bring them to class next time.